Welcome, Meatsmiths. You're listening to a Meatsmith harvest
Restoring husbandry to prosperity.
by means of the traditions of our fathers. This dialogue picks up where we left off in our last episode's conversation. You can find part 1 on our website, YouTube, or iTunes. If the content resonates with you, please consider supporting our team by going to patreon.com/Meatsmith and donating a small monthly pledge. This goes directly toward more free media headed your way. Thanks for staying tuned for part 2.
I wanted to ask you to, it's so easy. We could go straight philosophy the whole time. But I want to ask you about just the practical element of Gavwash. What does how did you learn to do Gavwash? Because that's hard. I've tried it. I have a funnel. I should grab it.
Mm-hmm.
Or the embouk, I think they call it.
Yeah.
It's about that long, and it's got
funnel with the green top.
Yep. And
Yeah,
it's got a little auger that I spin. So I've done it, not with a mechanized one, just that little manual one. And I did it with a Saxony for a month. And it was not easy. It was hard for us to get along. I wanted to get along with him better. And that's why I think I like the idea of doing Muscovies, because they're more goose-like in their temperament. I feel like they're not as flighty as all the Mallard descent ducks. But anyway, that's a tangent. How did you learn to Gavwash? And to Gavwash well?
I'm still learning.
Yeah.
So it was all by translation, right? And also I'm still learning to read proficiently in French, but we've got, obviously we have the resource in Mylis, who is actually a partner in the farm. So Mylis, when they went to visit her family in the Toulouse area, they visited a couple farms, and they talked with one gentleman for a long period of time and took a lot of notes and recorded a lot and then transcribed and then shared that information, which was extremely valuable because it was coming directly from someone living now doing it.
Yeah.
And also a couple of books that we had and a lot of research online. A lot of it I had to just scrape up from the weird corners of the internet, French websites from the 90s and stuff. And then there's in bits of pieces, because it's not like everything's just going to be disclosed, everything you need to know, about starting a foie gras farm in Southeast Louisiana. So Gavwash was probably the scariest to start for sure, because I didn't want to injure the animal. Because there's always the possibility of injuring the animal if you don't know what you're doing. And that is the only way you will injure the animal, is if you do not know what you're doing, or you, for whatever reason, do the wrong thing, still knowing what you're doing. If you do it correctly, you will not injure the animal. Unless the animal is, mentally off and, whatever. But so I started with exactly the gaveuses that you have, the La Rêve, green and
Yes.
white. Yeah. And with a little red knob.
Yeah.
Very, very cheerful colors. So started with that one on 3 Muscovies, which honestly, looking back, may have not been purebred Muscovies, and I think that was part of the problem. And because if the natural crossbreed between a Muscovy and a Mallard descent duck is usually going to be the drake on the hen. Correct? Yes. Anyway, that's beside the point.
I always get that one mixed up.
Yeah. So it needs to be done. That's why they do it artificially for whatever reason, also to get the precise cross with the moulard, which is the Pekin and the Muscovy. So we did Muscovy. We got a hepatic liver, so it was completely golden, but it was not the right size. And then I bought French bloodline, so French developed bloodline of Muscovy from, well, I won't disclose because they have limited supply.
Yeah.
And I take a lot of them.
Yes, yeah.
So anyway, it's a white Muscovy and developed for meat. And we did 20. And the foie gras were beautiful. They were beautiful. And honestly, I think, it's almost like if I could do every Muscovy Drake with just the hand-turned auger, that might produce the best possible result, because having very little experience and doing 20 with that, the foie gras was probably as beautiful as it could have been.
Wow.
Whereas, although I get much higher quantity now using an electric gavose, I think, had I used an electric gavose at that point, I don't think the foie gras would have been as high a quality. And I think it's not as, it's like anything, it's not as connected to living tissue. And so it's just not as natural a feeling for them with the electric. But for better or worse, and that gets into another subject, which we may or may not get to, regarding producing foie gras as opposed to like, beef or chicken or whatever sort of staple, as to make a living farming right now today. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's all I used is what you have, and you can do it. Anyone can do it. It's just being careful. There you go. Beautiful. That's what you need.
Yeah.
You can get that. There's a couple websites. They'll ship to the US. They're like $50, something like that, all told.
Yeah.
It's funny that, you're the one showing that I don't have any props. But right, so it's just a matter of being gentle and being firm. And the ducks, like you've mentioned before, you are not, when you go to slaughter an animal, you're not doing them any favors by being gentle with them. I mean, being timid. So when you go to, you want to be gentle, but I think people think of that as being timid. So when you go to get a duck, you grab him firmly by the shoulders, you put him between your legs, and you are holding his head and holding his mouth open firmly. And you need a firm grip so that you are able to precisely direct how the funnel enters the esophagus, because there is a lump on the tongue, and there's a cartilaginous area where the tongue and the esophagus, the trachea meet. And if you are bumping up against that, you will tear it. So you have to go up and over and down. And
yes.
So, and a lot of times, like, that's why we have olive oil mixed with the corn. So it's a lubricant. So there's olive oil in the corn. Sometimes there's milk and whey, so there's some milk fats, and those things are important to help lubricate and also to help get the proper dosage, so that those corn, it's all lubrication. The corn is not getting sort of stacked in this brick-like structure, but the kernels are able to slip past each other. You're filling up that crop to its capacity, and obviously not beyond. Because if you fill beyond, it's almost like the bottom third of the neck. If you fill bottom third of the esophagus above the crop, if you fill past that, he's going to be slinging corn out. He might sling out more than you want. He's just trying to get it out the way of his mobility, his ability to move. So I'm kind of getting technical now, but
I love it. No, I want all the technical. Yeah.
So it's a matter of doing that, and then because we're on a production model. Hey, Rainer, how you doing? We're on a production model. We're making a living with foie gras and some other products. This is Rainer. Come here. This is my boy. This is Mr.
Hi,
Brandon.
Rainer.
Say hi, Mr. Brandon.
Mr. Brandon.
There you go. So Rainer, you're gonna be a foie gras
Good to
farmer?
meet you.
Yeah? Or no? You're gonna be a foie gras farmer one day? No. Okay. I mean, and his older sister,
Yeah.
Anyway, so It's a matter of obviously getting that down to where you can be effective and efficient, and you're also making sure to take a special care from duck to duck, but you're able to do like one duck 30 seconds and then move on to the next one. So
yeah. And do you do a morning and an evening?
Correct. So with Muscovy, if you're going to try Muscovy, which I recommend because they're easier to obtain than Moulard. Moulard you have to get from Canada. If you try to crossbreed them yourself, you may be successful, but chances are you don't have the right genetics to begin with. So Muscovy are good, and they're usually like, there's some backyard people around who have a few extra. The Muscovy Drake is a great resource. He does take 4 weeks to fatten. The Moulard you can do in like 2 weeks, allegedly.
Wow.
But allegedly. So the Muscovy takes 4 weeks. I think though, it's not just an exchange of time. It's not just like, okay, the Muscovy is more readily available, so I'll do 4 weeks. I'll take that hit. I think with the Muscovy, you get higher quality flesh. You get a much higher quality animal. The meat is unparalleled, as you know. And then once you add that layer of fat and the tenderness that comes from that diet, there's no comparison whatsoever. The magret, the fattened duck breast from a Muscovy, I've had them up to 1 3/4 pound each, boneless.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
So, or 1.7, something like that. So it's and it becomes almost like it's not it's almost like trying to roast a tenderloin at that point. It's beef tenderloin. They're big, but they're delicious, and they make beautiful magret séché. The cured dried duck breast. The legs are massive and delicious. The amount of fat off of one Muscovy is just blows your mind. The trim, that fat trim that you take and then render down, grind and render. You might finish a goose, just like give them corn for 4 weeks or whatever, free access. But when you're doing gavage, man, the fat it's kind of overwhelming. What's your phrase? The burden of abundance. That's your phrase, right? So you absolutely get that. You're like, okay, now I've got hundreds of pounds of fat, and I've got to deal with that during this summer. So it's fun. It's good stuff. Everybody should try to do this because it, like you said, it is something that the grandmothers would do, and the grandfathers, and they have a little fatting stall, probably just one stall, right? And do maybe a few ducks. I would, to make it worth your while, do like at least 10, because once you sit down, you get all your gear. It's like, okay, I'm ready, and I can set aside this time. And I think for your family's benefit, do 10 and have 10 ducks, and hopefully you'll have, like 70% foie gras if you really take care. Hopefully minimum 30%. But I think it's one of those things people are like, what the heck is this? But it's a very natural form of agriculture. Like anybody can do it. Anybody can learn it. We don't have the knowledge, obviously, that the French have, but also that means it's not a commodity here. And so, we can almost appreciate it more. Some French people, sort of like American idea of the supermarket, they think I should just be able to get foie gras and it should just cost me, X. And it's like, well, this is one of the most highly skilled things, or not so much that as it's one of the most luxurious things. It requires so much input.
Yes.
And so, and so we need to appreciate it more. Like we need to spend more on it. And not think of, and the same thing has happened with chicken here. It's like, that's an omnivore, that should be expensive.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be white, spongy grossness. So, I don't think foie gras is in as much danger of that, but.
Right.
Yeah. And do you do just Muscovies, or do you do the Meulards, or do you do both?
So just the Muscovy. We tried Moulard down here. It was the spring, so it was kind of later in the foie gras season. But they were wimps, absolute wimps, as far as the temperature and Gavwash and everything. So I think the Canadians do well with them and the French do well with them, perhaps because of climate differences and I mean it's all seasonal too. But our late season is productive with the Muscovy, and so that's why we've stuck with them. They're also sort of more. They're definitely more adapted to our climate and conditions. Yeah. And they're almost they're native really to where we are in North America.
Yeah. And then how do you calculate the quantities that you feed them per gavage, per feeding?
Right. So the baseline during the majority of the feeding is 400 grams twice a day. So all you need to do is, basically determine what size cup you need to hold that much corn or corn slurry. Yeah. It's going to be predominantly corn. Yeah. And then you don't need to measure it at that point. You're just scooping, and making sure that it's whatever line you have on that cup, or the cup is precisely the size needed to be, round about 400 grams. Now, that's where it goes into the level of or the department of intuition, which is you are not feeding every duck 400 grams, so there's going to be a couple ducks, maybe who knows 20% that may take like 350, or maybe a few ducks haven't fully digested from the last feeding and you need to just let them pass that feeding. So you're feeding each of the ducks crop, and you need to make sure, usually my rule of thumb is like, if the crop is like halfway full or more, he's not getting another feeding. If it is, there's just a few corn kernels left in there, well, he's pretty much digested everything. We're going to go ahead with the feeding. He might not take 400 grams, but you can make a, obviously, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious if you actually force feed a duck, it's not a good thing. And that's I hate the translation. I imagine it was like English was my second language, French person who like translated that. Yeah, it's force feeding, It's like force means like jamming, like cramming. And people get that's what when people who don't know what foie gras is, they've seen some horrific PETA video, and they ask me about it. It's usually like, well, don't you shove the corn down their throat? And I'm like, well, I don't want to kill them or injure them, so I need to make a living. Right. I'm not trying to injure my animals. Right. So it's really you're filling them with what you're doing. Yeah. You are giving them a full meal, which they might not otherwise get in the wild. And so you are giving them everything that they need and more, that they can absolutely have the capacity for. And if you give them more than that, then that is when you run into problems. When you're like, you know what, maybe I can fit a little bit more, and maybe if I do a little bit more every time, I'll get bigger foie gras, well then it should seem obvious, but it's apparently not. So hopefully now
you have to be very I imagine you have to be very receptive, to all of the duck's cues. That's why I always feel like the best way to kill an animal is when you're intentionally slaughtering it, is to err on the side of intimacy. Hands-on, as close as possible, because that's how you have the most direct influence and control over a quick and decisive death. And I feel like it's the same when I was gavaging that duck that I did. It was like I'm feeling his whole body. Like we're way connected. I know everything about that guy, and I'm feeling his crop and keeping track of everything. And that intimacy, that proximity is totally essential, because you have to actually be docile to their nature. And yeah, that's why I don't like the force feeding phrase, like you say, because it's not a coercive thing. It's you're having to be so much more responsive to their nature. And even the capacity of their liver to expand and to take fat like that, that's part of their nature. That's not an illness in the liver.
Right.
That's part of how they can store energy. It's a natural capacity. Yeah, the intimacy is key. And then do you feed whole corn? And do you parch it? Do you boil it? Do you just feed it straight, raw, dry, whole corn?
So traditionally, it's the whole corn kernels, and that's what we use.
Okay.
And we're kind of constricted in that because the machines are designed a certain way. And, at Hudson Valley, for instance, they use a mash. And but it's administered a completely different way, I believe, possibly with a machine developed in Hungary, which is actually like they have a nice flexible rubber tube. And I mean, it's all very high tech. But we don't have those resources here. So we use, for better or worse, and I think often for better, we're using the whole kernel. I think it definitely has an effect on flavor and texture. Well, it absolutely does. So we use a high quality non-GMO corn that we get from a mill called Resaca Sun. And they serve here the south and the Gulf Coast area. And we cook it, and like if you're listening, write this down. because because the work it has taken just for me to like know this is kind of insane. Yeah. So so like write this down. Like this is like one of those moments in human history where we realize how important the written word is. And Brandon and I, I think, know this, but you may not. Just do it. Just trust us. Write it down and put it somewhere extremely safe. Maybe like frame it and put it on your wall in your kitchen. Anyway.
Yeah.
Now, what's not as important, I'm going to tell you first. So that is that you need to cook the corn at 173 degrees Fahrenheit for 1.5 hours. 1.5 hours, 173 degrees Fahrenheit.
I am writing this down right now. So is Lauren. We are both writing this down.
So that's not as important because, as Brandon has said before, this relies on the precision of our instruments to know the temperature, right? And like know how much time has elapsed, right? So what is more important, and really Sebastien Bonneau over in Austin has provided me with this information. He is the only other guy that uses Muscovies and actually sells foie gras that I know of. Okay, he's an atheist though, so screw him. But
we'll work on him.
No, I'm working on it. So he's a great guy, great guy, and like really affable.
In the most loving way.
Yeah, he's got a bit of affability where I don't. But so he is, he's great at what he does. But he said essentially, right, what you need is for the oh my goodness, the germ. That's the term I was looking for. The germ, right, needs to be expanded in the corn. Inside the kernel of the corn. You need the germ to be expanded. And you need the corn, like if you were to press hard on it with your fingernail, you would want to be able to split the corn. But you do not want the corn falling apart easily. because then you can tell it's lost its nutrients, and also it is it's not going to go through the funnel well. It's not, the auger is going to break it up. It's going to get all stuck up in the top part of the funnel there. It's not going to descend. And so it needs to have structural integrity where it can kind of bounce around, right? And bounce off other kernels, roll around, roll down that auger, turn, fall easily, just have structural integrity. But you need to be able to, if you can push your fingernail down the middle of it real hard and break it open and see that germ's expanded, you're at the right point, because now those nutrients are accessible to the duck. And you have not hopefully overcooked it. The way that he does it is he uses just a crawfish, I guess other people might call it like a turkey fryer, but down here it's a crawfish boiling pot set up, crawfish pot. You got your burner, you got your propane tank. He'll boil the water. He'll put the corn in the water and go about 10 to 15 minutes, and he's checking it. Between 10 and 15 minutes, he's checking the kernels. Okay. For me, I relied on the precision of my instruments, which is I had a scalder made by Wright Farm, Wright Farm products, and I think I've realized that same scalder is made by, it all comes from China. But so you can't actually get that scalder right now. You can get the 18 gallon. Yeah. But I just set it right to the temperature and then put brewing bags full of corn in it and walk away for an hour and a half. And then I drain it.
Yeah. Okay.
You can replicate this. What I'm going to try to do this summer as I'm preparing for next season is, if you get one of those submersible heaters, submersible water heaters, and put like an Inkbird or some type of temperature control on there, right? Just set it to your temperature, 173 degrees, put the corn in, walk away for an hour and a half, and drain it. You may want to hold on, if you're going to add water and you want maximum nutrients, so you do end up having to add water to the corn along with the olive oil. I add about a cup of olive oil to a 5-gallon bucket of corn, and then water after that to sort of mix it together. If you want maximum nutrients, then hold on to the water that you cooked the corn in and use that. If you don't have time for that to cool down, like me, you might just have to use the hose. But so these are the things that are so important as far as the nutrition the duck gets, because if this is off, you just will not get good foie gras. I can't stress enough, like, you have to cook the corn properly, like perfectly. and then you have everything that you need, honestly. I mean, you can supplement, you can put a little bit of like some soybeans in there if you want. I don't. All you need is corn, non-GMO corn. That's it. High quality non-GMO corn, or organic. If you're one of those rich people. So right. You're already rich. You're making foie gras. I mean, come on. So So it's that's probably the most important element. And then along with that is the skill of gavage. And so once you learn these two things, you perfect those two things, you're going to be just at the beginning of being successful.
That's excellent. I love that. It's like scalding a pig. That's you're scalding corn, and it's the same essential precision. I think I was undercooking the corn when I did my duck, and he would metabolize everything that was in his crop before the next feeding. He was empty. But all I ever got from him was a lot of nice subcutaneous fat and a little tiny dark liver. which was fine. He was absolutely delicious.
Definitely sounds like a corn issue, but also possibly breeding.
Yeah. He was tiny, and I was thinking, I'll get a large breed mallard duck. So I'll get Saxonies, and he was not large. He was in no way large. He was a little guy. And okay, so what about the age? How old is a Muscovy drake when you begin gavage?
So they can be as young as 11 weeks. We
Okay.
usually start after 12. Some people don't start till 16. And the reason I've kind of stuck with 12 is I've had the most success at 12 weeks, and I still get a tender bird when I slaughter. I think at 16 weeks, you're just on that line when you get to 20 weeks of starting to lose sort of the tenderness that your market desires, at least. The market doesn't care about you. But well, they do, but only to a certain extent. So that's where I do it. 12 weeks, big old Muscovy Drake, And you're looking for feather development is really the best indication of age, and it really isn't something where you have to grab the duck and handle it either. You're just making, if they have all their flight feathers, then they're definitely ready. And males take the longest to grow out their flight feathers, so you'll know. It's pretty visually apparent.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's when I like to slaughter them Muscovy Drakes anyway. Like 16 weeks, they're big and wonderful, and they're pretty good for harvest.
Yeah. So it works out from, I think efficiency is sort of maximized in that time frame.
Yeah. That's excellent. Oh, there's one more thing I had in my brain, but I forgot what it was.
Was it a technical question?
Yeah, it was technical.
Oh.
We have
Facilities?
the man here with all the technical knowledge. Yeah, I did. I imitated a video that I found on YouTube, which I'm sure you've seen because there's like 4 of actual foie gras occurring, and I'm sure you've seen all of them. Yeah. And that's not a PETA video. That's not some horrible thing. And it was neat. She had this little barn stall, very much like what you have, and a little divider and a little tiny stool. And this woman, her body was one of the gates, that she used to manage the flow of the ducks. And you would gavage one, and it would transition from the left side of the stall to the right, and those are the full ducks.
Yeah.
And she would just carry on that way. Oh, I was gonna ask, would you ever add milk from your cow to the corn?
Yeah. So if the cow,
have you considered that?
If the cow kicked the pail or whatever, or we made, Dorothy was making a ton of ricotta, so we would take the whey and add that. So yeah, milk and whey would go in, not every day.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
Yeah, definitely do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it does nothing but good. So.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting, and then you're not feeding them outside of the gavage. That's all the food they're getting when they're in that period of gavage is coming from the funnel. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And they won't eat anyway, because they'll just be digested.
Yeah. They're full.
Yep, that's right. And right now we're using our fatting. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say since our fatting stalls are otherwise empty, we ran the pigs through them. We've got them in the old stalls right now, and then our newer gavage setup, our rosary barn we call it because it holds 50 ducks. We have our breast chickens in that we specifically saved milk from the cow, and then the non-GMO corn that we have them on. So we'll slaughter those in a couple weeks, and I'll let you know how they turn out.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about that. I wanted to do that a couple years ago. When I looked, it was when they were just starting to get the American breasts available out here, and it was like $60 a chick or something like that. But I would love to do that. And then, do you do a pre-gavage treatment for them of any kind?
Mm-hmm. So you're looking at about a week is good. I've done up to a week and a half. I think a week is enough. So just enough. So 7 days.
Yeah.
And basically it's just restricted feeding. and you're sort of inducing that vestigial migratory gorging instinct. And so you take away the food all day long. You only give them as much as they want for 1 hour. And I have kept them on their usual ration. So that's like a 19% broiler grower with non-GMO corn, with non-GMO soy. Sorry for anyone who's hurt by this. And then I can only do what I can do, man. So they're out there in the field, and they get that full access to that for 1 hour each day.
Okay.
Right. So again, if you're listening to this, this is like $50,000 worth of information. So write it down. I know. And then if you are, I'm trying to think here. Right. So 1 hour a day, and then you make sure that you take it away. Right. So they don't know where it is. They don't get any food except for that 1 hour. And so they are going to go and gorge. And you'll notice after the second or third day that they are running over there and that they are wolfing it down. Okay. So next time you hear somebody talk about animal rights, show them that. But they, of course, they'll argue that you're inducing, whatever. But so they're going and they're wolfing it down. And when you look at them after they've eaten, when you come back and you take that food away, you will see a bulging crop, and it is completely full, grossly full. Okay, so ducks have this capacity, and what that does is it starts to dilate the esophagus and allow it to stretch to increase its capacity. This is specifically what it's for. If they need to go through a rough winter ahead, or they need to migrate, they're going to need a lot of energy, because waterfowl tend to just continue to fly right where they need to go for long periods of time, geese especially. But so they're wolfing it down. They are gorging themselves. They are gavaging themselves. That is exactly what is happening. So, naughty ducks abusing animals, abusing themselves. It's precisely what they're designed to do. And once you get past a week, then you've got that duck basically primed to be finished on corn. And, corn it's funny, right? Like how French is foie gras now, because we use corn and we use a Muscovy Pekin hybrid, or
right.
So it's kind of like we've got the terroir. Why aren't we doing it more? Well, it's because we're not French, but we do have some nice French pockets across the country. We just need, come on, guys, let's go. So it's what the other things that have been used are, as you've probably mentioned this in one of your podcasts, the figs, the dried figs, which is just kind of, honestly, I think that might be decadent. It's a little that's
like one at a time. I don't know how you do that.
And like, honestly, just getting to the point where you have dried figs enough to it's on the edge of decadence. That's why Rome fell.
If you soak them in milk, then you're almost Roman at that point. That's you're like the next step up.
And it probably takes a while. You're sitting there for a long time, so you're like, hey, Atticus, light up another Christian. I need more candles. So it's interesting. The Egyptians used like grain pellets, right? So dropping them down a hollow reed. So at least we have an auger, so it goes a little faster. But the corn works great, and just look for a high quality corn. Although I will say, we still had success when all we had access to was a 50-pound sack of cattle grade whatever corn from the feed store. When we were just trying to figure out what we were doing. But now that we've found a good source, obviously we're trying to use the highest quality we can access.
Hand in hand bear I, bedecked with bays and rosemary.
How many people do you know who are building their home culture around seasonal harvest and feasting? Or that are hunting as you are for self-sufficiency and back-to-the-land values? Or that share your artist's passion for human-scale meatcraft? At farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we've created a community of hundreds of omnivores from around the world with these shared goals, and 2 major places for them to learn from and inspire one another. First, we have our semi-annual hands-on educational event, The Family Pig, here at our Heartland homestead in Oklahoma. Come meet Brandon, get your elbows greasy, and over the course of 3 days, kill, cut, cure, and cook 2 pigs completely. You'll rub those greasy elbows with other meatsmiths from around the country, sharing meals and conversations to inspire you for years to come. Secondly, for more remote learning, over at farmsteadmeatsmith.com, we host a purely digital membership program with an archive of film and textual resources 5 years deep now. And both our on-site classes and online program include access to our most unique and rewarding private community Facebook page, Meatsmith Table, which is the only international network by and for homesteaders harvesting animals on a domestic scale using traditional and regional methods. We've been told that our classes are life-changing and the membership program unparalleled in quality and quantity. To get a taste of our education, search farmsteadmeatsmith.com and our YouTube channel for our free films, conversations, and downloads. Explore how we and other meatsmiths across the globe may best come alongside you and support you in building your home around the harvest. Please head to farmsteadmeatsmith.com today.
I remember I was disabused of the notion that foie gras or that gavage done well is harmful to the ducks when I got my first batch of muscovies just to slug control in the Pacific Northwest. And in the Pacific Northwest, we have these things called banana slugs they can be 6, 7, 8 inches long. And they're disgustingly huge. They're enormous. And I would watch muscovies, even dead mice. They would just swallow the whole mouse or the whole banana slug. And I even had a couple little muscovy chicks. They would go after the banana slugs, and they would actually gavage themselves to death. They would take on such a large slug that they would suffocate themselves. They would cap that hole that you're talking about where the trachea meets the tongue, and they would die. They would die to swallow a slug that was like longer than their bodies. It's like, guys, so you're actually doing them a favor when you take over the gavage, because left to themselves, they will gavage themselves to death. That was my experience.
I've honestly never seen that. That's insane. But
yeah, I couldn't believe it. Beautiful little hen. She killed herself with a slug.
I'm glad you brought that up. The flap. So they breathe through the base of their tongue, and you have this flap over that airway, and so that's how they're eating, right, over it. But they're also, because think of like a pelican, right? Sometimes you're watching a pelican eat, and you like feel like you're getting shortness, like you can't breathe, because you're like, when is he gonna breathe? Waterfowl are breathing the whole time. They have, that's why that flap is there, so they can breathe while they're eating. And unless, of course, they cover it with a giant slug. But so it's also a short feeding. So you don't want to be, holding onto a duck, feeding it for 5 minutes. You want to get down to 30 seconds. So, they're not breathing optimally. We're not going to say that the duck is breathing as well when it's eating as when it's not eating. But so that flap does protect food from getting in, and also allows them to breathe while they are swallowing something bigger, which is its purpose.
Yeah.
And they are swallowing crustaceans, swallowing a fish or something like that. So
Yeah.
important
Yeah.
details.
It is. Yeah, this is also important. It's so good. When are you gonna host Gavwash classes? I wanna come to a class in Louisiana.
Well, I don't have the expertise regarding class running, so maybe that's something we should do together. Maybe you should raise some ducks and fatten them, or some geese, and I'll do the same, and then we'll have enough for a class.
That would be awesome. Yeah, because I do think it's so good for the backyard. Like this is because it's so seasonal, and it's such a it meets that beautiful criterion of being a sublime food, I think, because it is so delicious. It's so extravagant. Like you eat this on, for your what is the term? The Réveillon, the Christmas feast, or for Easter or something.
Big in New
But
Orleans.
then it's also you have this immensely fat bird, which is you can preserve it. It's confit, so it's simultaneously thrifty and extravagant. And it's taking that that which is usually cast off, the liver, which is like this waste, and you're turning it into this one of the most glorious things you could consume, which is so good. Yeah. And then Ross, I know you actually have to farm. You actually have to do things today. And we've kept you for an hour and a half.
Well, I'm sure you have things to do. My animals will live until I get to them.
Okay.
That is what I have learned.
Do you have? Yes. Can you talk about the PMA a little bit? Do you have time for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. It's the first thing I've ever heard of it. And it was, I'm always encouraging small scale farmers to sell their product directly at farmers markets and to take on the selling of the product as that's a significant portion of their job, and it's an immense outpouring of energy, and it's extremely difficult to teach everyone how to cook and to teach them the narrative of what your product is. And farmers never, when they think of getting into farming, they don't think that is going to be an immense part of their job. And so it's always tricky. And I feel like part of the difficulty is that so much of what they are able to produce, even if it's excellent pork, it's all ranging in a forest and it's beautiful, high quality, it just gets vitiated by bad processing and destroyed and deteriorated. And they lose so much of that quality, poorly frozen, and then you're just selling these otherwise beautiful pork chops covered in bone dust, shrink wrapped, and it's totally unappetizing and not as magical as it actually is by quality. But I feel like if they could take back some more of that processing somehow, and extricate themselves from those processes that deteriorate their beautiful product, that would be awesome. And I feel like there's a structure for that, and that's kind of what I see in the PMA that you have lighted upon. So what is the PMA? How does that work?
So it is very essentially a legal black market. So
okay.
And now we know and we understand that it's legal. The government does not necessarily always agree, because the government, right? So the government is not a legal entity in the first place, strictly speaking.
Yeah,
it's kind of a corporation. That's a long story. Anyway, so you're looking at principles established in the Magna Carta. You're looking at constitutional principles such as freedom of association. And these are the things that we're appealing to and are stated in our contract. It's just on our website. You can read it. My inspector has probably read it, but he already knows how I feel. basically
Yeah.
rag on him for working for the government every time he comes here. But so you'll see precisely the constitutional amendments we're referring to and how they do directly apply to this situation.
Yeah.
But mainly it's freedom of association, right? So this is not public commerce, and so it's no one's business. Not that it was anyone's business in the first place, what you and I decide to do, as far as making an exchange. But since we place it in the private domain by making this a private membership association, we further, I guess you say, we have a better legal defense if we ever get sued for freedom of association, appealing to freedom of association. So that is the basic framework, is you cannot buy anything or sell anything unless you are a private a member of the association. And so that exchange is completely private. It is completely outside the realm of public commerce. It is the activities essentially of a private club, what the club decides to do with its time. And pardon me one moment, I'm going to pop out to the back deck here so that my children can come upstairs. So if the sound isn't great, just let me know. But
it's all right.
There we go. It's nice out here today. So that's the essential framework, Brandon. And so technically farmers could do exactly what you're saying they ought to do.
Yeah, that is, I really like that structure because it's such an appeal to natural law. It's so basic. And even the parts of natural law that are, sort of enshrined in our Constitution, if even to a deficient degree, but that some of them are there. And the need for that is real. And it's not just by virtue of these natural law principles, but by virtue of the degradation of the current system, which is it is unjust. It is an unjust system. Like I was there's a state in the Union, I was just talking to a farmer there, where it's like there's 4 slaughterhouses in the entire state. And a huge beef production company contacted all of them and said, hey, why don't you only slaughter our beef from now on? Because we need that. And this way you wouldn't have to deal with invoicing and all these other small scale customers. And they all agreed. And so what happened was it became impossible for anyone that is raising animals on a small scale to get USDA certified slaughter, which they are required to have in order to retail their meat, in the entire state. All of the slaughterhouses were taken over by leveraging the laws of the country and the perverse marriage of immense, beef production farms and how those laws suit those farms. And so what are the farmers to do in that state? What are they to do? And many of them are like, all right, fine. I'm going to slaughter my own animals and sell them to my neighbors. Like, that's what I'm going to do. Because I literally can't drive. I'm not going to take my 10 cows a year, outside the state lines to get this slaughter. Drive, 6 hours with diesel at $5.50 a gallon, all of this craziness. And so because of that system that is inherently and unavoidably unjust and makes their economy impossible, they just like, I'm doing it. And it sounds like a PMA would be a legal structure for that. So I guess what I'm saying is it's like the system itself is unjust, and it requires this kind of approach, I think.
A parallel system.
Yeah.
So it is so Miller's Organic Farm. I sort of based our contract off of theirs. I believe they're in Pennsylvania. They're currently being sued by the USDA, and I think that the specific reason was the USDA has been delegated the authority to collect revenue on interstate commerce as far as sales of meat. And so they were getting in trouble because they were shipping meat out, right, to members out of state.
Yeah.
And so one thing to keep in mind is you can still run afoul of, so that is a legally delegated authority, right? In that particular instance, you can still run afoul of the government very easily in this format. So just keep that in mind. You're not necessarily completely insulated. You're just basically saying, this is what we're doing. You know, we have the right to do it, and then you just do it. And you may one day get sued, but you know, you're hopefully most farmers or many farmers understand that they're already in the situation of martyrdom. You know, you're not really, you know, like, you don't always want to think of yourself as a martyr. That's not healthy, but being narcissistic. But there's you're just in an uphill battle, and you're gonna be, and we're all in the war, and we're all in the fight together. We're not likely going to win, but this is one way at least to protect yourself. And if you have, you know, at least a somewhat easygoing state Department of Agriculture, then you're probably not going to run into any issues, especially because no one's really going to know or necessarily care, because again, it's a private club, and so who's going, you know, if one of the private members, you might want to be careful with your vetting, but you don't want to be too careful because you don't have any customers. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, maybe just keep it within state lines, you know, sell within your state. There was, I saw the potency of this. I think we get intimidated by the perverse prospect of the power of bureaucracy, which seems ubiquitous and just, I don't know, it's terrifying. It's everywhere. And when I was selling meat at the farmer's market, and for very silly reasons, they shut us down. So literally, I saw the inspector in line, you know, coming up to my stall, and I knew what she was going to do. And I'm just selling, you know, slicing and wrapping bacon and everything there at the farmer's market. And she got up to me and she's like, I see you're doing this, this, and this. I'm shutting you down for the day at the farmer's market. And I'm like, oh man, and this is the first time it happened to me. And so she shut me down, and then she moved on to the next stall. And then the next customer came up. And, you know, because I'm essentially an agreeable person, I was like, you know, we just got shut down. I can't sell anything. And then the very next customer was like, I don't care. Can I buy some bacon? And I was like, yes, actually. This is not, there's no enforcement happening here at all. Yes. The inspector's usually trying to get to their next smoke break. And this is what was apparent to me was that what is happening here is a pact between me and you, my customer. Mm-hmm. We know each other. There is a relationship here. That's why there is trust. And that's why we can sell things to each other, and it's going to be okay. And it was just kind of like a light bulb moment there. And it was like, I guess I'm just going to keep selling each day, because what I need is the permission of my customer, of the consumer, you know, with whom I have this bond. Yeah. Yeah. And so that was amazing, because I feel like we give especially since it's policy, so much of it is just policy, and it's ambiguous as to their ability to enforce some of it, you know, on the state level and on the it's weaponized ambiguity, isn't it, too? It's
just nonsense. And it's destructive. You know, I witnessed it especially at hospitals. You know, the long time I spent living in hospitals, and the way people treat you because of policy, and because honestly, at the end of the day, they just don't want to lose their job. You know,
Yeah.
They just don't want to lose their job, and I get that, sure.
Yeah.
But I don't want to lose my job either. So you get to do your job, I get to do mine, and you can tell me what you need to tell me, and then I'll continue doing what I need to do. And I think that's what we have to do, and just like weigh the consequences. The consequences aren't really that great. Like, just do it.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, it's right and just that you do what you need to do to feed your community good food. And I'm going to do that. Like, there's some people I sell to, even if they're not in the PMA, right? And then obviously my main business, I have an inspected facility, but the other things that I do that aren't poultry related, I'll happily sell to someone that I trust and who trusts me, just off the cuff, no need to sign a contract or anything like that. This is the contract.
Yeah.
And there you go. There's your meat. Enjoy it. You're going to love it and be healthy and happy. And I think you're right. Most of us just need to do what we need to do and kind of ignore the man. He's just got to puff out his chest and bustle about and write his little citations. Just let him do what he's going to do. Do educate yourself. Probably 100 years ago, most Americans understood American jurisprudence, and we knew our laws. I don't particularly like or agree with our laws or believe they're legitimate, because Louis Alphonse de Bourbon, Duc d'Anjou, is actually the king. But but because I live within the structure, it's practical that I know the laws. It's practical. It's just practical. So I'm educating myself more. I'm realizing how much, just on basic things, traffic tickets, we're being railroaded illegally. And so begin to stand up for yourself, begin to understand law. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, because most of the time they're just trying to move you through an administrative process that is not a judicial process when you are issued any sort of citation. Okay? Like, it's administrative process. It's not, and oftentimes they're not following due process of law. If you get a citation in the mail, for instance, and it's not certified mail, you never received that citation, legally speaking. I'm not a lawyer, so go look that up. I could be completely off. I know I'm not off. So just like all this stuff is crap. It's just smoke and mirrors. It's meant to intimidate you, and get you just to stop doing what you're doing so that Tyson can keep doing what they're doing. So just most of the time you can safely ignore things. If they start to get aggressive and they're showing up at your place, or they're sending you stuff via certified mail and all of that, where you have to legally accept that it is in fact a reality, then you might need to go to court and win a battle for the rest of us, if you can. But that being said, as long as you're doing business with people you trust, they trust you, it's likely you're not going to run into an issue. The obvious problem with that is that you're not going to have a very large circle. And so making a living 100% from farming isn't necessarily going to work. And that's the big battle, and that's where the lawsuits have to happen. And that's also where we just en masse have to stand up. And so probably, Brandon, what you and I can work on, and others, is we need a substantial PMA in every state for this sort of thing to work, and we need strong people standing up and doing the right thing, and also providing the service to other farmers. So a PMA it's not necessarily like the way some people run it is like, this is a PMA for my farm so that I can make a living, and you got to join the PMA to buy the stuff. Another approach to that is to, like you were talking about, I think in one of your latest podcasts, is to make it a guild. And PMA takes the place of the guild. You join the PMA. This is where you do commerce. This is where people come to you. This is where you go to them. And the guild has a hierarchy, a loose hierarchy that basically like, yeah, if you screw somebody over, well, we're probably going to kick you out. But other than that, anything goes, right? So anything that you want to do within the structure of the PMA, as long as it's not immoral, you can do. You can buy, you can sell, you can trade. And basically provide a structure where people can feel protected and feel safe, just simply living their lives, and not feel like, you know, oh, I don't have the capital, the expertise, or the intelligence to run a farm because the government says so and the financial system says so. But I think that's a service that people who have the perhaps the, you know, clout, I don't know, I want to say clout, but just a little bit of a presence in the community farming, we need to do it for others, and get them a place at the table, you know.
Yeah, it's I like that. When it comes down to it anyway, the reason that so many of these policies and these bureaucratic structures exist, at least explicitly, is for food safety, you know, and which is of course a whole different prospect when you're slaughtering 100,000 birds a day,
right,
and feeding other cows to cows, and, you know, doing all the horrible things that industrial farms do. Maybe you should have some policies, you know, so we don't give everyone bovine spongiform and whatever that is, encephalosophy or something. It's not a philosophy. It's something else. But it's not just a difference in kind. It's not just a difference in degree. It's a difference in kind. The small scale farm. And what it comes down to anyway is that those mega production facilities are not persons, so they don't have virtue, which is the basis of economy, which is the basis of you know, your virtue producing beautiful foie gras, because that's what you do. And it's healthy and it's clean and it's wonderful. And that's because you're a person, so you can have virtue.
Right.
And that's the basis of all good production, good harvesting anyway. Of something that the large industrial is not even capable of. Not even capable of.
Indeed, it becomes something that's been on my mind lately is farming to provide for your family, farming to make a living. Today, you live a pinched life. You are pinched on the one hand by government and by large corporations. On the other hand, on the other end, you're pinched by the consumer's ignorance, or the consumer's weaponized ignorance sometimes, which is, I can't afford to buy what you produce, which imminently translates to, I can't afford to produce it. And so, you know, it's funny. I was having this conversation the other day where it was like, well, if I buy food from the farmer's market, I can't afford my mortgage. And I was just like, I said, all I could say to that is, well, if it's really a question, you know, of you paying the mortgage, you know, all you can afford is like, you know, some ratty clothes and to pay the mortgage, and like, you know, toxic food from Dollar General Market or something, you know, like, God bless you. I hope that our community pulls together and helps you out, you know, if that's all you can afford. Right. But I think that that's, having worked in personal finance, that is kind of like a gross exaggeration. And, you know, Joel Salatin talks about this all the time. You know, he gave an example of a guy pulling up to buy chicken in a BMW, a brand new BMW, and then complaining about the price of chicken. And he was like, sir, well, you drive a nice car, you know, clearly you understand quality. And that is what we provide. That is why the chicken's $15 at that point, right? I hope you cannot buy a chicken for $15 right now from a local farmer. I hope it's more like 20, 25. But
yes.
But it's, it's one of those things where, okay, like I understand your situation, I understand where you're coming from. Who ought to pay the mortgage of the local farmer? Then, you know, is it a someone but not me question?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, who ought to support your local community? Someone but not you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
one of the most telling moments, I think, was during the pandemic, was people flocking to the farmers market, and lines and lines and lines at the booths. And then immediately when the supermarkets were more available, you know, it went back down to the usual light stream. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think people need to realize, and we're all preaching to the choir here, but maybe it's good ammunition for some, you know, is
Mm-hmm.
we de facto always have the back of our local community as farmers. De facto.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I even raise like broilers. I raise Freedom Ranger broilers for the middle market, right? So we de facto have our community's back, because
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what happens. Is we're there when a crisis occurs, and then they
Mm-hmm.
need food, right? That is what happened.
Yeah.
But they don't have our back, and oftentimes it's a difficult conversation. You know, again, I think that ties into the reason why I'm producing foie gras, which there's some sadness there, which is, you know, in order to make the whole operation sustainable, I have to produce a luxury product. Whereas the ideal would be, right, I can, again, produce staples that everyone can or ought to have in their kitchen on any given day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a difficult conversation. We all probably have experienced it. And sometimes it just takes you taking the risk of having the difficult conversation with the people in your community who maybe most should support you but don't, and then ask them why.
Yeah.
And just ask them why, and maybe also let them know that you're open to whatever answer they give.
Mm-hmm.
And don't lash out. You know, don't read my comments on Facebook, essentially.
Yeah, well, I find so much of it comes down to the fact that people have such abysmal, regrettable culinary ignorance that they're blinded by the commodity form of grocery store food to its reality and to what it can be in their kitchen. And so that's why, you know, you mentioned, you know, having to sell a luxury product. That's why, I mean, I love to do the classes, but also we have to do the classes. You know, as just providing the service of slaughter and butchery, I'm already way more expensive than everyone else. And yeah, it just wouldn't be enough. It'd be a volume game. I'd have to do many, many, many more animals to the point where I'm getting employees, and it changes the whole paradigm.
Right.
But people need to learn how to actually want the higher quality product. And because it's so funny, like look at the price per pound at the packages of meat in the grocery store. It's extravagantly expensive. Even
Yes.
the cheap stuff. It's
Yes.
ridiculous. But
Yeah,
you go to a farmer's market, see that same price per pound or less on a package at a farmer's market, you notice it. You just, the only difference is that you don't notice it at the grocery store. And what you're getting at the grocery store is denuded, boneless, and fat.
The guy with a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you feed them? How do you raise them? Are they, you know, can I come see the farm? Can I, you know?
Yeah.
Like, who's behind the meat count? Like, can you ask those questions at the grocery store?
Oh man.
No.
It's been a great.
Completely correct. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a strange experience for us. Yeah. And that's why I would spend, you know, the farmers markets were like 15-hour days, 17-hour days. But the most exhausting thing for me was to teaching people how to cook. And the most effective thing I found was you have to woo them. You have to like connect with them and be like, I want what is best for you. And that means buying a $56 Boston butt roast. Like Absolutely. That's what you need to do. Why are you here? Why are you at the farmer's market and you don't have your bags full of food? You need this, you know, $10 a pound, full fat, skin on Boston butt. And let me tell you what you're going to do. You're going to take it home and you're going to cook it this way. And you've never cooked anything like this before. And it's going to be the best thing you've ever tasted. And you're going to be able to eat it for, maybe 5 or 6, 7, 8 days because it's huge and you're a small person and this is going to stretch out and you'll have leftovers and it'll be wonderful. And it is. They go home and they do it and it works. And then they're like, wow, yes, yeah. And that's why I just, people, so much of this battle is at the stall, at the point of the retail sale, is just teaching the consumer, grabbing them and being like, look, you are a human, you have an immortal soul. That means you cook food. You engage in the culinary arts because you're immortal. Yeah, you're not an animal. You're not just filling the hole, It's got to be delicious and it's got to be beautiful because you're worth it. And so much of that is lost, I think. And so much of the small scale agrarian economy is held down because people don't know how to cook and prepare food that way.
Yes, and expectations, certainly managing that, going to the farmer's market and expecting 10 times what they're getting at the grocery store, and then, and then the price might be the same or a little bit more, and that's frustrating to them. It is definitely that. But you are doing something important, which is teaching people how to utilize, at a minimum, just large cuts of meat. Yeah. And that is something we need to do more of. I think maybe where I've failed is, just having cooking classes on the farm, because we need to educate on how to cook, because we need to humanize people again. And like, no one understands the difference between 2 different types of chickens, for instance. And that's just huge. That's just like mind blowing, right? It's like there's more than one. You mean? Yeah. There's more than one breed of chicken I can eat, is what you're telling me right now. They don't even know what the breed is, so what am I saying? So it's education is so important. You're doing it. We're definitely having to do it a lot, which is, again, the social media presence, and to encourage people, you can make a living farming. You can, like, all these things that we're saying, we're still farming, right? And we're still happy doing it, and having the highest probably level of joy we could have in any profession. You can make a living doing it. It's sad that we aren't all farmers just kind of trading stuff every now and again, but so we need small scale farming, because we have to supply a lot more people, in our local community than otherwise we would in a true agrarian peasant economy, like I know Brandon would thrive in. So you can farm like Joel Salatin says, and it's just going to be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. So make it a mission. If it's your mission, then it's your mission, and that's what you got to do. You might be a nun, you might be a priest, you might be a sister, you might be religious, you might be a farmer. I think it fits in the same category, or a knight, right? There's Charles. About Charles Coulomb, the great Catholic historian. Funny guy, but he's talked about this picture of the knight and the priest and the peasant, right? And it's a medieval image. They're all next to each other. Underneath the knight, it says, "I protect all." Underneath the priest, it says, "I pray for all." Underneath the peasant, it says, "I feed all." And that being that sacred relationship between the three, that's completely gone now. But I think the love is so evident in the peasant, who's just like, I'm just feeding you, like I just feed everyone. Like, everybody's got this basic need to eat. I'm just gonna feed you, and that's something that we can rejoice in. Like, a lot of us have grandmothers who taught us how to cook, or mothers who taught us how to cook, and who just rejoiced in feeding us good things. And and that's what the Garden of Eden was. And so that's what we can do for our communities, and be joyful in it. Sure, there are struggles, there are trials. It is dark. Sometimes it is very, very dark, especially when animals die for no apparent reason. And these things you can't control, but it causes really the impossibility of being an atheist when you are a farmer, or at least the reasonable impossibility, which is, if you pay attention to your reason, you rely so completely and totally on the Creator just to survive. Hopefully this whole conversation has inspired someone who's been keeping in their backyard to quit the off-farm job and throw everything in, and live on pennies for a while, and I don't know.
Yeah, it is the good life in the end, and I think it's largely because you're not so much swimming upstream. You are swimming upstream if the stream is conceived as the world as it is and the human structure around us that we've created. But if the stream is, the natural order and the design of the human person and of the land and of domesticated creatures, then you're swimming with the current. And it reminds me of one of the most poignant lines in The Lord of the Rings for me is after the great battle in the Return of the King, and they're all in the beautiful fields in between Minas Tirith and Mordor. And a poet, of course, stands up. Oh my God. Yes, that's it. And he starts to chant, he starts to sing. And he's basically recounting an epic poem of what just happened. And it's so beautiful that Tolkien describes it as it's joy that pierces like sorrow, which is exactly what joy is on the human plane, I think. And that is the deepest joy. And that's part of
the same sensation, the same emotion, joy and sorrow. Yeah,
they come together.
That is Tolkien too. Like, in essence, that's who he is.
Yes. Yes, and I think that's also, oh man, we can't talk about Lord of the Rings because that'll just go for an hour. But if you want, I would love to do a whole show. Yeah, I could do a whole show on how the films that were made were an attempt at the modern world to understand traditional Catholicism, to understand Tolkien. And you can see exactly in their making how the deficiencies of the modern moral system and the modern philosophy, because they were incapable of perceiving very obvious things in the Lord of the Rings. It'd be so fun. But we should probably get back to the joy and the sorrow because we've been going for 2 hours.
Yep.
But of course, we could go longer. I think it'd be fun to have you on again too. But Ross, tell us where people can find you, your website, and how they might acquire some foie gras.
The plug. We're off season right now, actually. So we go October through mid-April, and then we produce basically a finished product until we run out of smaller foie gras lobes in the spring and summer. But we're on Instagram, Facebook, Backwater Foie Gras, and we have a website, of course, backwaterfoiegras.com, and that's where you can find us. We ship every now and again to individuals, but honestly, if you're out of state, you just need to produce your own foie gras, or you can come see me. Shipping's super expensive, so you really want to stock up if you're gonna ship overnight some foie gras. You need to stock up. But if you want to do that, just contact me directly and we'll work it out. But yeah, that's where you can find us.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we should visit the farmers market. That would be in the farm and get foie gras direct. Does it freeze well, do you find, foie gras?
Yeah, some people say it doesn't. Honestly, I think it freezes fairly well. You lose maybe a bit of the texture that you might prefer, but I haven't had really any major issues freezing foie gras. No.
Okay. It's good to know. All right. Well,
Thank you all
thanks
so much.
again, Ross.
Such a blessing to talk to you.
It's been so fun to have you on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, guys, God love you.
God bless you, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you again, Meatsmiths, for listening to this podcast and our take on all things meat making, householding, and culture keeping. We hope it's helped you grow your home around the harvest.